This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 2nd of November 2022. And now that I've mentioned the date, I realise all the calendars in the house need changing. Luckily, there's only 3. So, in today's episode, I get into a bit of an issue around male stereotyping and how men are characterised and portrayed and perceived. Now, this does hark back to previous episodes of The Clear Out, and particularly reference to Iron John, Robert Bly's sort of men's wellness book from 30 years ago, which I don't refer to in this episode, but it's in that territory of the popular stereotype of a man as something that is in a domestic setting. And here's a spoiler now. If you don't want to know the wordle answer for the 2nd of November, because it might still be the 2nd of November somewhere when you're listening to this, I'm going to say that word now. The word is inept. Inept. So there's a characterization of men as being inept in a domestic situation, and I have an issue with that, and I kind of talk about that quite a bit, and I look at stereotypes of women as well, but it's mostly my thoughts around kind of positive representations of masculinity and a celebration of the men that I know. Many of my friends get shout outs in this episode. So yeah, because I think we need to hear more of that, and it needs to be a challenge to some lazy assumptions around failed masculinity and toxic masculinity. And in a way, this episode is a sort of a rebuttal to all of that, while not denying the existence of behaviours that are far from ideal and attitudes that are far from ideal from certain men. I also share some stuff about a few days of poor mental health I just went through, and coming out at the other side of that and overcoming the challenges that I was presented with, which I think is very relevant, seeing as this is a wellness podcast. So yeah, so that's what's coming up. I think it's a pretty good episode. I wasn't sure where it was going to go when I started, but I was quite happy with where it ended up. It felt pretty coherent, and it's a bit of a big cheer for men. So yay for men is what's going on in a roundabout way and in a direct way. So that's what's coming. Get into it. I will see you around the corner. Cheers.
Not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. Maybe I should rename the podcast The Soak Through or The Blow Away, because the weather is so ferocious at the moment. Rain is cascading down, cascading like a waterfall on top of my head, and there's a fierce wind blowing out there as well, although it looks like it's backed off for a second, which means there might be some interruptions to the recording of this episode. I just had a 3-second power outage. Everything went off and everything came back on. Lines may go down, and I will be dependent on the battery life of my laptop to keep me going. So we'll see. It might be a technologically truncated episode. So be it, and a very welcome change, some of you might say. Now, today is going to be a free roamer, a bit of a ramble. I have a few little nuggets rattling around my noggin, and as ever, I might find a through line. I might find a way to thread the needle. and present some connectivity. But I'm not going to guarantee that. I'm not going to guarantee that. So if you are a new listener, you are so very welcome. So very welcome. And if you want to know what this podcast is about, fundamentally, it's about explorations of wellness, explorations of coping with the struggle of life. But it's not a downer, generally. It's an upper. Okay, it's a nice little buzz you get. So it's like a mid-level illicit substance. Nothing to get too freaked out by. It's not going to send you down. It's going to give you a little lift. Might keep you buzzing for a little while. It's all pretty safe, and no one's going to be too cross with you for taking it. Okay? So yeah, explorations of wellness, and one of the driving sort of impulses behind the podcast is to offer a bit of a counter narrative to the hyper positivity and hyper performative presentation of positivity in a lot of contemporary wellness content. Look, there's a lot of people out there trying to do their bit, trying to advocate, and a lot of people just, in my opinion, fall into the trap of really over-the-top curation of a contrived positivity and a contrived resilience, which I don't think is helpful, frankly. I believe it's much more helpful to present your vulnerability and to be open about your struggles, and to put them into a balanced place. They don't have to define you, but I think owning them, looking at them, and being open about them is, in my opinion, a healthier paradigm, a healthier equation, and so really that drives a lot of the sort of the dynamic of this podcast, this creation, this tell. Because as I say, until I go on camera, it's not a show, it's a tell, and I'm telling and you're listening. So in any case, my wife and daughter left me a week ago to go on holiday to Australia. Boom, boom. Bit of great, just my comedy stylings there. My wife and daughter having left me in that permanent sense, to leave me a wreck of a man, broken-hearted, abandoned, wondering about all the things I did wrong to lose these special people in my life. They've just gone away. They've gone away to the land down under to see my wife's family, to celebrate my mother-in-law's 80th birthday, which, unless my calculations are wrong, is a week from today. Well, at the time of recording. So I'm on my ownio, if you ignore the guinea pigs, the chickens, and the cats, and the voices in my head. Post-Halloween chuckle. But it's funny. All joking aside, and in the spirit of openness and vulnerability, I did have a bit of a moment last week. I mean, I've talked around this. I've talked kind of beside it. I've kind of danced a bit, but there's no two ways to put it. And if I'm putting my money where my mouth is, there have been tough times in my marriage, and that places a strain. It places a strain on my wife, on myself, on the family unit, on life, and it's been an ongoing thing for quite some time. And we, both my wife and I, struggle with the difficulties of what we have to sort of negotiate in different ways, and that's sort of part of our difficulty, is the way we differently cope or fail to cope. And I just found myself wigging out a bit last week, because I just had suddenly the house was quiet and I had all this time to think, and I'm definitely predisposed to thinking, analysing, reflecting. Yes, maybe guilty of overthinking. And I kind of got myself into a bit of a state, because aligned with my other lifelong habit of succumbing to episodes of depression, there was a sort of just a nasty combination, and I just felt, I suppose, quite despairing, and I mean, desolate? I don't know. Desolate's not the right word, but I was experiencing a high level of anxiety and a high level of kind of emotional vulnerability, I think is how I would describe it. All of my own creation, all of my own concocting, because I'd been left alone too long. Don't leave that fella alone. Oh, no, you've got to keep an eye on him. Don't leave him alone. Oh, for God's sake. You didn't leave him alone, did you? No. Oh, no, that lad needs minding. So I was... The way I view it, because I've kind of come out of it, I've come out the other side of it, and it was quite confronting. And, nothing I really haven't, experienced before. And I kind of look at it and go, well, I get to the other side of it and I go, well, that's okay. I mean, I was obviously processing something, and, deep within myself, or in my kind of unconscious or my subconscious, I really wanted to dwell and obsess a little bit and immerse myself in my own kind of sense of whatever, anguish or concern, or my sense of unfairness or injustice, or a little bit of a self-pity party, and that's grand. And I came out of it and sort of gained some relief and gained some fresh insights. I did have the benefit of having a friend to visit, who I was able to speak to pretty frankly. He was a good help to me. So I'm pretty sure he's another non-listener of the podcast. So as always, I'm very happy to give a shout out to the non-listeners. So thanks, big lad. Thanks, big man. Thanks, Ian. I named him. Thanks, Ian. Ian O'Malley from Greg in Carlowtown. Greg in Carlowtown is basically like an area of Carlowtown. Carlowtown is the county town of County Carlow, a few counties away from Wicklow. And Greg is quite unique. It's like it's right, it's very much a part of Carlowtown, but geographically it happens to be in County Laois, the bordering county. So that's a strange one, isn't it? Anyway, he is truly a Carlow man. Anyway, I leaned on the friendship. I'm a great believer in doing that, and it was helpful. It's good. It's good to get someone to bounce off. And yeah, I mean, I was already sort of coming out of that, because I'd engaged my wife in conversation, well, via text message and whatnot, and yeah, we've started a kind of an important and healthy conversation, I feel. It's tricky, and I mean, I think if you're someone who's listening who's been in a long-term relationship, and by long-term I mean long-term, we're talking 15, 20, 25 years, whatever, there is a sort of I think there's an understanding and an insight born of experience from people who've really gone the distance, that goes, yeah, there's nothing you're going through that's new. And and that's fine, and that can be comforting sometimes. But there can also be a way of dismissing the familiar experience of others, or the experience that you think you know or recognize in others, because ultimately, and I'm sure you won't hesitate to agree with me on this, you can never know what's going on between any two other people. You can never, ever really know. Just as it's hard enough to know ourselves, you put another person in the mix, an intimate, and the vastness of each person's many, many worlds of interior experience, and they come in together in this sort of conflagration, this strange, dynamic, melding, clashing, loving, living, fighting thing that is rarely in perfect harmony, apart from certain blessed moments, I guess. In any case, I dance around it because I just feel it's just too much to kind of presume I can just share openly in this format stuff that really is deeply personal to my wife. That's really, I think that would be a line crossed, and a line too far. I'm happy to share my own crap because I'm so fascinated. I find myself so fascinating, and I, and even that I control to an extent. But there is a willingness on my part to go to vulnerable places. But when I'm talking about myself, and that's my decision, and that doesn't really affect anybody else, and it's not a transgression or a betrayal of trust. So in a way, that's why I do skirt around and dance around it. But in any case, so I had these kind of few days last week, through the weekend, and just feeling pretty raw and kind of, I suppose, without interruptions. So there was nothing to buffer me or distract me or deflect me from the total, complete, committed wallow in the mess of it all. And the positive thing that I was aware of even at the time was years ago, particularly in my early 20s, probably my early through to mid 20s, I simply would have gone under. I just would have gone under into a deep, deep depression, and being in an absolute state of contempt with myself, and a state of rage and disgust with myself. And I would have been heaping judgment and vilification on myself for failing to be up, and failing to be well, and failing to be happy, and failing to be coping. And I've come so far from that I can still get into a pretty bad state, but I can still drag my ass out the door and put healthy habits in place. And that's what I did on I think Sunday was probably the lowest point, the nadir, if you will. We won't. Okay, the lowest point. But I still did my sort of morning routine in the garden, went through my sort of qigong, tai chi, stretching, breathing exercises. Gave myself, no, actually, I was about to say I gave myself a good breakfast, but I didn't, because my intention was to go down to the sea to swim. And I just got away probably a little bit later than I'd hoped, but I went down to the sea, and it was just far too disgusting to swim in. I've turned away from the sea, I think, 3 times in the last week because the conditions have been so unfavourable. And I drove down to the sea, and from distance, as I was approaching, I thought, oh, the sea actually doesn't look too bad today. Good. And I was quite optimistic about being able to get in the water, which I just find I continue to find so therapeutic, and it's such a great circuit breaker, to get in the water. And by that, I mean the circuit breaker, like the circuit of being on a loop of thinking, particularly negative thinking or stressed thinking or anxious thinking, and the break, the sort of sensory demand and the sensory assault of getting into open water, into cold water, coldish. It's probably just gone below 14 degrees, I'd say, in the last couple of weeks, maybe a bit lower. And the challenge of the conditions, particularly at this time of year, October, November, the sea is often very, very rough and what some would consider unswimmable. But I have, as many times as I have got in and taken on the challenge and felt confident in my ability to swim carefully and safely in difficult conditions, and to swim with a measure of control and awareness. I've only been caught out a couple of times in quite a few years of swimming now. But it was interesting. I went down the other day, not in great headspace, but going, no, I'm going to swim and that'll help. And then I'll pick up a few things at the shop and I'll go back. And I wanted to do a bit of writing for the wellness app for Aura. Can you feel my aura? For Aura. And I was so sort of deflated when I got to the sea and pulled into the little car park right at the beach, and I was just going, oh no, that sea is pretty bad. And I think objectively, based on my previous experiences, I probably would have gone on another day if I'd been feeling more resilient, stronger, more capable, more defiant, more self-assured in the moment. I would have gone, no, I'll be grand. I'm just going to swim through the rough stuff and get out the back of the waves and I'll be fine. And that has been the case before. But I sat there in the car for half an hour just looking at the waves, negotiating my sort of precarious state. And I ultimately decided, no, I just don't have it in me. I just don't have it in me to get in there today. And that's okay. So again, many years ago, I would have driven away in a really bad headspace. I would have driven away feeling really negative about myself for not being up to the challenge. But on Sunday, I was like, it's okay. I recognize that I don't have the resources today. I don't have the resources for this fight right now. This physical fight to get into that water and have that battle. And overcoming my fear and anxiety. Because there's a psychological battle, particularly at this time of year, as the water gets colder, as the conditions get worse, right through the winter. The psychological battle is often the bigger part of it, to go, it's okay, I'm going to be fine, I can do this. And on Sunday, I recognised and validated in myself that I just don't have it today. And luckily, there's a local swimming pool that was going to be open shortly after that. So I was able to hit the shops, get me messages, and then I was able to have a quick swim in the pool and do some lengths. And that was a win. And so in kind of difficult circumstances, it was a win. And even on the other side of the swim and going home, I knew I still wasn't in great form. And I went home, gave myself like a large late breakfast, and sort of chilled and, looked at news headlines online and was thinking, yeah, my plan today was to get to the laptop and write and do like a sleep story for the app. And I had to accept again. And it was just like looking at the sea, I had to accept again, do you know what? I don't have it today. This was my plan, and I'm on my own without distractions on a Sunday with a free day. I do not have the resources, and that's okay. So I had a nap. Like a little baby, I sucked me thumb and I put the blankie up under me chin and I lay down there on the couch and I had a lovely little sleep like a little babby. And it was lovely. And I got up and I went out into the garden and I swept the leaves in the garden. The garden was covered in a blanket of leaves. And I went out with the soft rake and I swept the leaves and I got rid of them. And the grass underneath the leaves was so green and vibrant and bouncy and luscious. I just felt great. I felt so good just doing that simple action. And it was just a real timely reminder of the benefits of giving the body something to do. Giving the body a simple exercise to do when the head and the heart can't quite cope, or when the head and the heart are embattled. And I did that, and I just felt, I felt pleased with myself. I felt I've actually made good decisions today to mind myself and stay healthy and not spiral into a really negative descent. So just it was great. And then I topped it all off by making myself a very healthy, nice dinner, sort of a yummy vegetarian curry, and it was good. And I just woke up feeling a lot better the next day, and I had a message from my wife which gave me a lift as well, and things were good again. So there you go. Oh, and sorry, I also then decided to sort of freestyle a story for the wellness app based on my day. So I just wrote this, well, not wrote, because I kind of composed it on the spot and recorded it on the spot, a sort of a sleep story called Sweep Leaves, Clean the Garden. And I sort of anonymized myself and sort of strung the episodes of the day into a narrative of sort of Zen recovery and overcoming defeats and making better sort of wellness choices and self-care choices. So so there you go. So that's grand, and thanks for bearing with me on my little sob story. But here's another thing that came up. Oh, by the way, you might have noticed in the background I have music playing. So I had this kind of yearning today. As I said at the start of the podcast, the weather is kind of manky today, mouldy, rain and wind, and there's been a little bit of a temperature drop, nothing crazy, but I sort of had this yearning for coziness. So I've come in to record this now. It's mid-morning, and I've put the lights on in here, and I decided, you know what, it might be nice to have a bit of music, a little bit of comforting music. So that's Arvo Part in the background for Alina. And if you're someone who's listened to the podcast from the very start, if you go back to the first episode, Arvo Part for Alina, that very recording I'm playing, has a special place of interest in the lore of the podcast and in the family dynamics in this household at #blessed. So if you're curious, you can go back and listen to the first episode from the end of May. The end of May last year, wasn't it? 2021, yes. So I've got music playing, and here's where my wife would probably check me into some sort of asylum or commence paperwork for an involuntary lobotomy for me, not for her. I've lit some incense. I've lit some incense, and that would just be hysterical and sort of very confronting for my wife, because she really likes incense, and over the years I've been a bit like, incense, it's just a bit too much. But I've just found recently, very recently, like in the last couple of months, when my wife's been burning incense, I've gone, oh yeah, that's really nice. And so here I am. Yeah, so these are like, I've kind of got like a symbolic comfort blanket around myself with my music and my incense, and I'm all cozied up, and I've got the heat on as well in here. So I'm kind of pampering myself, and yeah, it seems to fit with the theme. So anyway, grand, never mind all that. Another thing came up when I was sweeping the leaves, and bearing in mind the sort of headspace I was in and had been in for a few days, I decided to listen to a podcast, and I sought out relationship podcasts. I just thought I'll just go to a place I don't normally go to and listen to an expert, so to speak, someone who is in the field of relationships, and therapy and psychology and counselling. And I thought I'd like to listen to a female perspective, and I thought I don't really want to listen to Esther Perel. Esther Perel is pretty ubiquitous at this stage across social media and across the podcast world and across public platforms and various, talk platforms. Esther Perel, if you don't know, she's French, I believe, but like a multi-linguist. And she has a hugely successful podcast, which friends of my wife and mine, put us on to. I can't think of the name for a podcast now off the top of my head. Oh, is it Where Do We Begin? Is that what it's called? And Esther Perel, she puts out a lot of good stuff and a lot of interesting stuff. But it's not that I resist her, or maybe I do. I mean, I like an awful lot of what she has to say, but I just wanted something that I wasn't at all familiar with. And so I came across a female psychologist who has a podcast, an American Jewish woman. And is her podcast called Relationships Made Easy, maybe? And she's Dr. something or other, and she's got a pretty over-the-top American delivery. If you're an American listener, forgive me. And a very kind of, showbiz energy, kind of, showbiz mummy kind of self-deprecation that doesn't really ring true. But I thought I'm not gonna get caught up in the delivery. Okay, this is a top tip from me. Don't throw away something that might be valuable just because you can't handle the packaging. Yeah, there you go. That's my top tip today. It would have been very easy for me to go, oh man, the voice, the energy, the presentation, I'm not really going for this. And I thought, no, I'll stick with this. And she was great, actually. And I found her on that particular episode. I just found what she was saying about relationships very resonant. I found it very helpful. I found it very, there's a beautiful yellow ladybird beside me. Come here, ladybird. Ladybird, ladybird, fly away home. Your house is on fire. Your kids are alone. Is that how it goes? Beautiful. Anyway, sorry. I found her content, like what she was saying, I just found it rock solid. And, she has her practice and she has clients and she has a lot of experience, and it was great. And then I listened to another one, and she had a guest on who specialised in men's psychology, and it was another female psychologist or someone in that territory. And she had some really nice things to say about men's vulnerability and about being able to access that and giving men the platform to access their vulnerability and their openness. And that was all good stuff. It was all good stuff. except my only caveat was at certain times when they were talking about men in a more generic sense, they each seemed to be reverting to an impression of men or a sketch of men as manchild doofuses. That's my coinage. I'm afraid it's terminal. He's a manchild doofus, and there's nothing we can do. Don't worry, he's not going to die anytime soon, but it's incurable. Manchild doofus scene from Grey's Anatomy, or ER, or Saint Elsewhere. Let's go back in time, or Trapper John MD. So our movie of the week, Hallmark movie of the week, Manchild Doofus, starring what actor would be a good manchild doofus? I mean, a comedy actor is a bit too obvious. It might be funnier if it was somebody like Anthony Hopkins. An English, or in this case Welsh actor of great gravitas and stature, being the main character in the Hallmark movie of the week, Manchild Doofus. In any case, so these two professional women who are working in the field of psychology, counselling, therapy, advocacy, doing really good stuff, evidently, and saying so many really good things. I just felt disappointed that they reverted to a sort of a lazy stereotype of men, and it didn't discount all the good things they were saying, and it didn't make me value those things any less. But I just found myself going, right, hold on. Because I just thought, like, it doesn't help. It doesn't help. It doesn't help to sort of, whether intentionally or not, it doesn't help to validate that idea. The idea that men are sort of helpless gobshites. That's the Irish version. That's the Irish version of the Manchild Doofus movie of the week. This Sunday on RTE2, Helpless Gobshite, starring Brendan Gleeson. Frank couldn't understand why he didn't get the respect of the women in his life. And then one day, his friend Pat sat him down and said, "Frank, I have to break it to you, but there's no other way to say this. I'm afraid you're a helpless gobshite." Okay, so there's two. Okay, so any movie producers out there, you have my blessing. You can take those. I just want 5 points of the net profits, however long it takes. I'm a great believer in the long-term plan. Okay, so money in the bank as far as I'm concerned. So in any case, I just found myself sort of balking at that idea and thinking, well, yeah, okay, sure. Of course there are people out there. Of course there are men out there who maybe don't stand up in relationships and don't share the workload in the home and are emotionally inarticulate, or are emotionally clumsy. But again, this is a stereotype that I would struggle with, and maybe through my life I've been critical of the female position of patronizing men, and a kind of a default female assumption that men are incompetent. Now, that is, in no uncertain terms, sexism. And I think it's the equivalent, it's the counter to male sexism directed at women. And I'm not talking about power abuses. I'm not talking about sexual objectification of women. I'm just talking about men, a sexist frame where men go, women, they're so emotional, they're so unpredictable. Sure, women, you never know what they're going to do next. And they're never satisfied. And the one that I hate the most, actually, the cliche that I'm hit with the most by a certain type of man, is happy wife, happy life. And I wouldn't have the time or the like, that's a fight you can't win. You can't win. I'm like, well, actually, my friend, I disagree with it. I think the most important thing to look after is your own happiness first. Take care of your side of the bed, I think, is really the priority here. And anybody's wife, she's responsible for her own happiness. That's not your job. It's just a cliche of I just have to keep the missus happy, and sure, then I can get away with what I really want to, and I just find that phrase, happy wife, happy life, it plays into an idea of male happiness not being of equal importance. And it plays into an idea of a male partner being relegated in terms of the need for emotional nourishing or emotional care. And I kind of despise that idea. And I couldn't wish to invalidate it anymore. So I think since I was a sort of a young adult, and I've encountered that throughout the years from women, not casually or talking about other men or just making an assumption or the generalization that sure you wouldn't expect any more from men anyway. This kind of, as I say, a sort of an emotional relegation, and it contributes to the infantilization of men. And men, they know this. And many men will then willfully infantilize themselves and willfully lean into boys' clubs and a sort of a willful idiocy as part of their way of having fun or letting off steam, and bonding with other men who are also playing this kind of self-harming game. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I have a sense of humour, and I can very much go to that place if I want, when I feel I'm with friends that do know me better. Because for me, there's no humour in it unless there's a lot more going on behind the curtains. It's only funny if but like, I know there's a load of other good stuff there. There's a fully rounded, complex, emotional human with agency behind the messing. And I suppose the fear is when there haven't been enough good role models, when there's been a poverty of education in this area, is that perhaps some men, or maybe many men, I don't know, they take the silly stuff as reality, and it retards their development. It slows down their growth. And it makes their understanding of masculinity and male peer approval, it makes it very sort of flawed and limited. And that this is, I'm not saying that with any data to back it up. That's just my sort of anecdotal observation through life, because I'm interested in such things, and I found myself at odds with that dynamic, and it's probably a dynamic I don't crave or seek out very much. And I suppose maybe arguably I could say, well, the feminine in me is quite high, because what I probably value more than anything is the one-on-one, like spending time with one friend and being able to have total access and total intimacy. I find that much more nourishing to my emotional life, to my sense of self, and it's kind of where I live. And I have a lot of very, very good male friends. The strength of which friendships are built upon that dynamic. Which is not to say I haven't been in groups of friends as well, but that's my jam, as they say. As they say on MTV, as they say, in the younger generations. Well, that's my jam. Just me and my man hanging out. So it's. I just find that interesting, because I think that way of thinking, this sort of lazy infantilization of men by women, which is a way of othering men as well, of course, that feeds into also the belief that toxic masculinity is rampant and everywhere, because it believes men aren't capable of not thinking in that way. And it supports the idea that men are driven by sexual objectification, that they're driven by their othering of women, that they're driven by misogyny and fear of women, and that fear manifests itself in hatred of women because they're threatened by what women represent, which is like thoughtfulness and consideration, which is also a cliche about women. And there's a kind of a that idea also supports a sort of a veneration of women, and an imbalanced veneration of women. And this is coming from someone who does venerate women to a certain extent, and has always been interested in women and liked women, not just as sex objects, although that's in the mix, but has just always liked female energy and been attracted to aspects of womanhood, of the female form, female expression, female personality, the female experience. And my position has always been, well, why wouldn't I be interested in them? They're the people I desire. They're also the people who I share this world with. And they're among my favourite friends and family members. And I'm also married to one and the father of one. So surely, we're all better off if we understand each other better and like each other better. And I don't know. I mean, look, this is meant to be a party political broadcast on behalf of why can't we all just get along. Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and I'm the president of the Why Can't We All Just Get Along party, and I just want to say women are great, but I also think men are great, and I also think gays are great, and lesbians and transgender people and black people and Asian people and people with disabilities, Jewish people, Islamic people, people with vulvas and people with penises and people who are trying to decide if that's what they want at all. I just think you're all great, and I think the human experience is very challenging for all of us in different ways, and everyone's doing their best, and why can't we all just get along? So if you want to join my party, you can. Everybody's welcome. I mean, that's kind of the point. Yes, even you bigot. Anyway. Oh my God, it's lashing rain. It is such a poxy day. When I was in acting school, the artistic director who has since passed away, but she was kind of a monster, and very had some very warped notions about what made good acting and what you could do to train good acting. One of her great lines was, "Repetition is a gift," and kind of don't squander the gift. So make sure you change pitch and volume every time you repeat a word. I didn't do that there. I just said it the exact same way. What a poxy day. Little bit of emphasis on the last one. She would have you say, what a poxy day. Now, wasn't that much more compelling? That is good acting, as taught by the great. Should I name her? Would that be in bad taste after I called her something of a monster? I feel it would be in bad form. Don't speak ill of the dead. Anyway, she was an interesting, monstrous figure who, in many ways, we were all a little bit scared of. Yeah, she was a bit of a despot. That can happen in acting schools. Cults, they're like cults. Any organisation that is small and has a charismatic leader at the head, they all become cults, really. You just got to keep your wits about you. That can happen in karate as well. I mean, I've trained with some odd people and odd instructors. You got to keep your wits about you and focus on what's really important. This goes back to my top tip. Don't throw away the good stuff just because you don't like the packaging. Keep your eyes on the prize. For me, karate has been the prize. Always. Doing the stuff. Doing the karate. Doing the moves. Engaging the mind, the body, the spirit. Putting yourself through the paces, through the rituals, the routines, the forms. Karate has never stopped rewarding me. And I've been taught by people whose approaches I haven't always valued. But I've still recognised the good things that they've been able to do for me. So, yeah, that's really what I'm talking about, in that area. And so again, going back to that podcast and those women and what they were saying, so much good stuff there. And I will listen to them again. I'll seek out the other woman, the guest as well. Her name was Shayna Jones, maybe. I will probably go and find those and put links in the description to this episode if you're interested. Yeah. So I just found myself on the back of that, having that reflection about the stereotypes around men, the infantilization of men, how it feeds into the toxic masculinity narrative, and how it's all out there. It's all out there in this contemporary, world we're living in. This world we're living in now. It's all out in this brutally clumsy, unsophisticated discourse that happens so much at the moment. And it did make me feel. I mean, I remember, encountering this thinking, a couple of years ago, and thinking, do you know what? I'd love to write a book. I'd love to write a book, and on the cover of the book, I'd have a picture of a box of Crayola crayons, and on the front of the box of crayons, I just have the words non-toxic. And it would be a book celebrating positive masculinity. And I don't, I have no desire to sweep the failings of men under the carpet. But it just so happens that the vast majority of my male friends don't exhibit behaviour that could be called toxic. Don't and haven't ever really exhibited behaviour that could fall into that catch-all toxic masculinity. The vast majority of my male friends are stand-up guys. Decent, thoughtful, sensitive men. Vulnerable men, honest men, men who show that side of themselves, and men who have been good husbands and try to be good fathers and good providers, but who have remained faithful to their friends, to their male friends, who have tried to be good family members, who've tried to walk with honesty, who've tried to walk with their own demons and face their own traumas, and many of whom who continue to do so. Some friendships that I've had for a very, very long time. And these are men who continue to be of enormous value to me personally, and to be of enormous support. And these are friendships that are not built around drinking. These are friendships that are not built around objectifying women. These are friendships that are built around human connection. They're friendships that are built around mutual regard and respect. And these are friendships that are built around male love. And I think they're beautiful. I mean, I just think they're really great people. And it's a source of pride to me to know I know those men, and I can consider them close and can consider them friends and part of my world, and my sort of they're part of my understanding of what men can be and what men are. And so to have listened and seen for so long so much stuff about toxic masculinity, and please don't misunderstand me. It's not that I don't recognize the behavior that is described as toxic masculinity. It doesn't mean that I haven't been in contact with that, and it doesn't mean that in some ways I may not have contributed to that unconsciously or in immature ways in my youth. I mean, I did talk about this quite a lot at the start of this year after the murder of Aisling Murphy. If you go back to January of this year, you'll find the episode I did where I think I called it the crisis of broken masculinity. And I mean, part of that crisis is not hearing enough positive messages around masculinity. Part of that crisis is not honouring male vulnerability, not honouring male trauma, and not celebrating the wins, and just giving into lazy stereotypes and giving into lazy thinking. And that's never going to advance us. It's never going to help us. It's never going to bring us to a richer place. It's never going to be edifying if we just kind of go, it's easier just to take the given opinion rather than to cultivate my own, rather than to engage my own critical brain. And you may have to start with yourself, and often that's challenging to go, well, what do I think? What do I feel? How do I behave? What are my dynamics? Where has this come from? What's shaped me? Why do I believe these things? What am I afraid of? What makes me unstable, insecure? Where are my needs located? Why do I interact with the women in my life this way if it's suboptimal? That's where it starts. It has to start. It starts at home. Cliche number 178 on the Clear Out podcast. It starts at home, lads. It starts at home. But like I was thinking, I mean, the way the women on the podcasts I listened to were talking, and again, I came away from those podcasts really liking those women, and I plan to listen more. So when I say those women, I'm not denigrating them or othering them, but the way they were speaking, I was kind of laughing. I was laughing because if I was the type of man that they seemed to be depicting in the stereotype that they were referencing, that would mean, with my wife and daughter away out of the house for just over a week now, that I'd just be wandering around my own home like a toddler or a young child lost in a shopping centre. And then the postman arrives. Oh, what's wrong there, little man? I can't find... What is it, little man? What's wrong? I can't find... No, go on, tell me. What is it? What can't you find? I can't find the washing machine. Oh, no. And I can't find the washing powder. Oh, you poor little devil. Here, can I help you? It's worse. I can't even find the utility room. You're a very dirty looking little man. You look like you're a chimney sweep. I haven't been able to find the bathroom either. And I've run out of socks. All the clothes in the house are dirty. And every time I go to the fridge, there's less food in it. And my bed isn't made. And none of the dishes are clean. And all the presses are empty. I can't find a fork or a knife anywhere. Then I realised someone had hidden my socks in a drawer in the bedroom. But I have managed to watch a lot of football. I have managed to watch a lot of football and drink a lot of tea. And I did drink every drop of alcohol in the house. But I don't know where it's going to come from. And my wife is on the other side of the world. And I don't know her phone number. So, it would be a bit like that. And are there still men out there like that? Really? I mean, it's not inconceivable, I suppose. But really, are men as utterly useless as that? Are we really manchild doofuses? Are we really helpless gobshites? Really? I mean, I don't know. And when I say I don't know, I mean I know they're not. Not the men that I know anyway. And even some of the men I know who might veer, they might have 1 or 2 feet more on that side of the camp. Even those lads know where the washing machine is. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, I don't know. I don't know how nuanced that commentary is. But it's all I've got. It's all I've got. That's all you're getting. Now, here's an interesting one. Okay? Here's an interesting one. I had a student at Holistic Self-Defense last night who was great. She just came in with this great attitude and a great sort of openness. And she's been in the wars lately. She's in her mid-40s and she's recovering from breast cancer. And she was really interested in the idea of becoming more assertive. And she just said very straight out, she had a bit of a conflict in her workplace with a fellow worker, another woman who sort of spoke to her rudely or dismissively and made her feel bad, and she just couldn't really handle it, and it made her go off and have a quiet cry. And she was like, I can't handle that. I want to be liked. I want people to like me. Now, I instantly liked her the second she walked in the room. She just brought this real nice energy. As I say, open, very kind of engaged, and very sort of can do, willing to try things. And, you just can't ask for it. You can't ask for better than that. And I was doing an exercise with her where she had to stop me approaching her by saying no. That was all she was allowed to use. Just access your no energy. And it's part of trying to embed an idea of putting down boundaries. And she basically, the exercise is she stands on one side of the room and stands still, and I approach her walking in a very straight line with an appropriate energy, nothing too crazy, but you can escalate it and repeat the exercise, so you're finally coming with quite menacing or aggressive energy. And I just walk towards her directly, and she has to stop me with no. And we did it, and she only stopped me when I was right on top of her, and then her hands went out and she gave me a good strong no, and that was good. But she said she wasn't able to do it from distance, because she just doesn't have that energy in her. And it was, it was really interesting. And we tried to kind of give her different things to think about and different ways of thinking about energy and thinking about things, other ideas like about the body and how to change the quality of energy in the body, and not locating it in an emotional narrative or in a confrontational real life narrative, but just like, okay, well, imagine your body is full of concrete, or imagine me as representing something else. Like we decided to play with the idea of, like, I represent the cancer coming back, so something that would cause her to have a strong reaction. And anyway, that's grand. And we had different levels of success with different ideas we tried, but like overall it was a really really good experience, and we all kind of appreciated what she was bringing to the session. But I was thinking later, like, that idea of I just want to be liked, and I want to the phrase people pleaser came out, and the desire to sort of fix things. And I mean, I could really relate. I have a lot of that in my personality as well, and it would have been much more pronounced when I was younger. And I've become better as I've gotten older at sort of curtailing that impulse to appease and to please others, particularly in areas of conflict or stress or bad behaviour. And in the area of not getting a response that you want, being able to sort of let it go, because I think what can happen is, and this is reflecting my own behaviour and my own thought patterns and stuff in my marriage as well. Like, this student last night also talked about being an overthinker and kind of fixating on things that in that area of conflict, and I certainly can be guilty of that in terms of what goes on in my marriage. And if I'm in bad form with that, I can catastrophize, and then everything becomes far worse. And so, like, I'm trying to look now at the moment, like, I'm trying to look, well, I need to kind of regulate this a bit more and keep a healthier perspective on things and not wig out. But in any case, so it was interesting to me last night. Like, the student kind of presented me with a bit of a mirror of myself in certain ways, not exactly. And it gave me a lot of food for thought. But then I was scrolling at home later. I was on Instagram, and I follow a woman who calls herself the holistic psychologist. I'm pretty sure that's what she calls herself. And she puts up a lot of really good stuff in the area of recovering from trauma, in the area of dysfunctional family dynamics, in the area of unhealthy relationships with ourselves, the internal life, the interiority that I'm so obsessed with. And she put up, it just so happened, she put up a great one last night, just a few connected Instagram posts, or a post of 7 or 8 pages, where she was talking about the stereotype of being a good girl. And I read through it, and it's interesting, like, in this context of the conversation I'm having today about male stereotypes and touching on female stereotypes, the idea of what we're pushed into, and the idea that men are pushed into maybe infantilization by other women. Men maybe push each other towards that in an area of male bonding, and there are other things that we haven't really touched on, but maybe you could go towards the area of men pushed into being tough, being independent, not showing weakness, not showing softness, not showing vulnerability, not crying, being able to fight for themselves, to fight their corner, being able to kind of butt heads with other alphas. All of that stuff is encouraged in very, heteronormative stereotyping, gender stereotyping. And women, and my wife could definitely relate to this, and it's certainly come up. My wife has been on the sort of the menopausal journey in recent years, and that's in the mix. I mean, I remember as a young man, I would have made a lot of jokes about the menopause, thinking I was hilarious, making jokes about the change of life, and thinking I was Mr. Comedy. There's nothing funny about the menopause at all. Let me tell you. I'm laughing, but I'm sure you recognise that's a nervous laugh. The menopause is, it's impactful on one's relationship with one's loved one. And that's me on the outside with no physical change happening in my body, but my wife's been going through it, and it's a tough journey. But this idea of being a good girl, behaving and appeasing, that is a stereotype. It's a model and an iteration of femininity that is laid out for girls from a very young age. And this Instagram holistic psychologist, she was kind of laying out the thinking behind it. And basically the thinking behind it is set aside your own emotional needs and set aside your own emotions to keep the peace. So her example, for the sake of illustrating her point, was, there's an uncle in the family and the young girl doesn't like the uncle's energy and feels uncomfortable around him and doesn't want to really be around him or be in his presence. But the young girl's mother says, go and give your uncle a hug. And the idea is then that the girl is being told to put aside her own misgivings, her own intuitive emotional response to keep the peace. And the response for keeping the peace is, good girl. Good girl. You're a great girl. Well done. Good girl. And then the message over time becomes, if I control my emotions, or if I suppress my emotions, or if I sacrifice my emotions for others, I am a good girl. And that's where my value is located. Now that idea of where is my value located, that's a huge idea in what I'm trying to teach in the Holistic Self-Defense course. The idea of, what are the items of value worth protecting? And when that's something external and materialistic, that's often quite an easy choice. I'm going to protect that, highly valuable item. I'm going to protect that brand new phone I just bought. I'm going to protect the contents of my purse. I'm going to protect my laptop. But then my question to students or participants in the course is, well, what about yourself? Are you valuing yourself as something that should be protected, that should be kept? Are you putting that value on yourself? Like, where is your value located in terms of your own view of yourself, rather than putting your value into the hands of others' approval? And that was very much at the crux of what that student I was referring to, what she was kind of struggling with last night. Now we had some joy ultimately with what we were doing, which was great, and mutually sort of pleasing. But I just thought that that it's a very powerful idea, and a lot of women it's cultivated in them, good girl, and sort of don't act out, and fall into this model of expected decorum and conduct that is praised as being mature, and And then what happens is, and again, I'm going back to the holistic psychologist, what she was saying, what happens is there's an anger that builds and builds and builds and builds in women because there's a conflict, because they're not being allowed to be themselves. Society or the family unit or the community or the culture has prescribed something for them. And because they want to be good girls and compliant members of, to this expectation, they're suppressing their real feeling, their real emotion. And what I've encountered now and read and learned through my wife's experience, the menopause, which, and I'm going to paraphrase really crudely here, so don't kill me, because this isn't meant to be a menopause episode, but if the menopause in some ways represents an end of a certain iteration of femininity, and it represents the end, of course, of fertility, and for want of a better word, ripeness. That's a very particular term, but again, I'm putting it into a narrative of how women feel they're perceived by men and how their desirability is perceived by men. Suddenly, and again, I've just read a few articles about this, women who've been through the menopause, and talk about the sort of purging, venting, releasing rage of feeling like, well, I don't have to behave like that anymore because I'm no longer what I was. And it's a sort of a catch-up rage, like a lifetime of this conditioning and this good behavior. And again, this kind of, I am not speaking with any real authority here, and I'm not for a millisecond trying to say this is every woman's experience, because that's part of the crapness of discourse these days, the assumption that one experience represents the experience of all. I'm just saying I've read some things that have presented this idea, and the sort of the anger, the accompanying anger that comes at that time of life for some women, and that anger can be directed at men. And it's it's interesting. I mean, and what does it come back to? It comes back to this idea then of us making assumptions about behaviour, and us being lazy in our thinking, and us being lazy in our characterisation of each other. And that's why it's great to actually get to know people properly, the people that you're interested in, the people that you care about, and to be unafraid to get to know the other. And for a man, there's no closer other than a woman. What do you think of that? Is that a reasonable theory? I had one last question, which probably would merit an entire episode of its own. And it comes back to this idea of value and who's of value to whom. And I was thinking about this after the class last night and that girl's experience and what she was sharing in the class. But I found myself thinking, are we only of value to the people who know us? Are we only of value to the people who we have in our lives, to the people we're known to? Especially if you have this idea about yourself that I only recognise my value and I only recognise my worth as I perceive it in others' reactions to me, in how other people respond to me, in what they say about me, in how they talk about me, in how they evidently feel about me. That's where I get my sense of self-worth. Now, I wouldn't discount that, because that's a very important... I mean, you heard me rhapsodizing about my friendships earlier. So a huge part of your self-worth can come from friendships and relationships and how you are perceived by others, or your understanding, or your recognition of how you are valued by others. But if you only locate your worth and value in other people, you're in trouble. You have to find a way to value yourself if you are going to be well, if you are going to walk through life with confidence and resilience and a sense of, I've got this, I've got resources, because I know what I can do and I know what I'm capable of, and understanding where your boundaries are. But I did find myself just speculating on that idea. Are you of value to people who don't know you? And I suppose ultimately, I believe, yes, you are. You are, because you don't know. You don't know. I am a great believer in the ripple effect, in the knock-on effect, in the domino effect. Your actions in the world have a consequence. How you behave has a consequence. How you conduct yourself has a consequence. The ripple effect has a consequence. And it's partly, I partly believe that because it's connected to my concern with the sort of, my concern with the bigger picture, my concern with how we all are in the world, and my awareness that I am in the mix with other people, and I'm in the mix with other people who don't know me, and I represent certain things, whether I want to or not, and I care about my footprint in life, my footprint in society. Now, not to the extent of peeping out through my window, not to the extent of keeping up an appearance that is inauthentic, because on another level, I would say I don't give a shit what other people think of me. That's, I've no control over that. So is there a contradiction in that? Perhaps there is. But what I believe is ultimately, yes, and this is coming from a guy who's built a huge part of his identity around words in recent years. Actions speak louder than words. But the action of doing the podcast is an action of advocacy. It's an action of the demonstration of vulnerability and self-interrogation that I think does contribute something positive to the 3 listeners of the Clear Out. Thanks, Mammy and Daddy and Granny. No, there's legions of non-listeners among my family and friendship group. Shout out to Bob, actually. Bob, another non-listener. Bob broke up with his partner. They had a young son together, and the relationship ended, and they just went for a mutually agreed 50-50 custody arrangement. So it's a week on and a week off with their son. And I just thought, well, Bob's a great example of a man who stepped up and didn't hide from responsibilities, and stepped up in the most competent way. And when he found himself struggling, when he found, man, this is tough being a single parent, he went to a parent group. He went to attended like a parenting course to improve his skills and to improve his understanding and to try and become a better father. And he was the only man on that course. And I'm like, Bob, you're a legend. So I'm going to actually, I'm going to seek Bob out to go listen to the very end of the podcast, just so you can hear me giving you a shout out. So yeah, there's another example of a man who's not a manchild doofus, who's not a helpless gobshite, and who stood up to be a good man and a good father and is walking the walk. So, and that's of value to me, because I like that iteration of masculinity. And if you're a man listening to this podcast and you don't know who Bob is, that's got value to you, I suspect. So there, I've just supported my own theory. You are of value, even to people who don't know you. That's the ripple effect. So, boom. Ripple on, my friends. Ripple on. Okay, I'm done. It's been another epic. So listen, I usually say give me a shout out on social media, which some of you do or have done, but not many. But thank you very much to those who have. I also usually spruik for patreon.com. I have, at the time of listening, 4 patrons. It's going really well. I was a bit deflated last week. I listened to a great episode of the Blind Boy podcast, and he was talking about how when he started his podcast like 5 years ago, how it really did change his life and gave him an income stream, and it's made him independently, it's given him a sustainable kind of cash flow to live, which he hadn't achieved through 10 years of being a performer and writer, singer, artist, whatever. And he was kind of saying when he started his podcast, he said the podcast just took off, like right from the first week. So he said, the first episode had 70,000 listens. And I was laughing and crying at the same time because that was his first episode. Now, he was established at that stage and had a following and a great track record, and he's a very talented, interesting guy. But I was laughing at myself because like 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, I finally had like 4,000 downloads after a year and a half. And I was going, I'm a legend. And I put up my social media post, 4,000 downloads, not too shabby. And then I was like, oh my God, this is hard. It's hard. It's hard to get a purchase. It's hard to get a foothold. It's hard to establish this thing. But I have faith in it, and I like what I'm doing. And I know from some of you who've been so kind to give me feedback, you like what I'm doing here too. So, yes, if you want, you can find me. The links will be there. You can find the social media stuff in the description. But here's a new thing, okay, that I haven't thought of before. You can give me a review wherever you're listening, particularly on something like Apple Podcasts. There's a way to just go, 5 stars. This guy is brilliant. Love what he does. Love his work. Please think about that. Consider giving me a review on an appropriate platform wherever you're listening. And do also consider becoming a patron, because that is what a lot of independent podcasters consider the best workable model of sustainability. And as Blind Boy puts it, it's fairness. It's just an issue of fairness. The podcaster produces something of value, of worth. They work on it. They spend time. They invest. And if you're enjoying it, you're only being asked for a very small way of acknowledging that, if that's available to you. And it might not be, and that's absolutely 100% cool. But if it is, and you think, you know what, if I was gonna, I wouldn't take a book from a bookshop and not pay. I wouldn't take a CD, if you're still a CD person. I wouldn't take a CD from a music shop and not pay. Or I wouldn't go to that cool hipster vinyl place and get a vinyl, a record, an LP, and not pay. And that's part of my wellness structure, my wellness infrastructure, buying my music, my books, my entertainment. Podcasts are in that territory too. And podcasts, I mean, free podcasts, that's the way to go. Make it available. I think there's a sort of a nobility, an artistic nobility and decency in that. This is a creative product. And if you want to become a patron, I'd love that. I'd love to have you on board. And I'm very grateful to I think it's 4, might be 5, the 4 or 5 patrons I have. You are brilliant. And thank you so much for investing in me, in this. I do appreciate it. And it does make a difference. It symbolises something really positive. Okay, boom, there you go. I'm out. Mic drop. I'm actually not going to drop this mic because it's worth a bit of money. I will see you next time. Have a beautiful week. Stay safe, stay dry. Don't get blown off the face of the earth. And think kindly about others. And don't indulge that stereotypical nonsense. Don't indulge that manchild doofus crap, that helpless gobshite rubbish. Don't do it. We're better than that. And so are you. Okay, take care. Talk to you soon. All the best. Bye.